And before you start talking about not all Asians are like this, yes, I understand. But in this video, I'll be talking about from my own personal upbringing and stories. And if you drive a Lamborghini or Ferrari and your parents are heavily invested in real estate, I'm not talking about you. That's a video for a complete different topic. You know what I mean? But I'm going to share exactly how and why my upbringing was so different, but then I realized it was also very common. I grew up like alone most of the time, and because of that, I had to be very independent at a young age, and I went through a lot of things that most people don't usually go through. So when I grew up, I thought that something was always wrong with me. But the more I talked about my story on TikTok or wherever, I realized that my story is actually pretty damn common. It's just no one shares about their hardships or their struggles. Emotional, damn it! So growing up as a first generation Asian kid, there's a lot of things that I felt was different. I always felt that something was oddly different about the way that I grew up versus the other kids that I grew up with. I came from poverty. And the very fact that my parents could not speak English. And what that does when you grow up as a kid growing up is that I remember since I was like in the third, the fourth grade, 8, 9 years old, I was the one bringing forms from school and having to translate for my parents. Hey, this is exactly what it means in English. And I'm like, hey, make sure you sign here and put the date here. So as the very beginning as a kid, there wasn't really a sense of a role model. You were essentially the one in the household that knew all the English and had to translate whenever they went out and about and were talking to people or going to a school teacher conference. You were the one that was translating for them. You were the translator when you were only 8 or 7 years old. And growing up within a poor family, if you don't know anything about my story so far, is that my parents are a lot older and they are full-time janitors. And because of that, it really changed the way and the outlook that I saw on very life itself. The minute I realized it was different was when I was working for an influencer. She talked about how her life was so hard and how her parents had to help to pay for her condo within the financial district of downtown. And her little free apartment was a struggle. I grew up without a childhood, understanding that seeing them work so hard gave me one, work ethic, and two, understanding that I was the eldest in the family. I needed to take care of everybody. I needed to make sure that one day everything will be okay. And that is a hell of a lot of pressure for a little 8 and 9 year old Peter. And growing up with this different mentality in life, I thought life was so unfair.
I feel as though I'm cheated because instead of me fulfilling my prophecy, I have to start one. Instead of me, doing a good job and carrying on the empire, I have to build one. And that's a hell of a job for a 21-year-old.
Some people are born into education, born into wealth, born into knowledge where maybe they're the second generation, the third generation. For me, that wasn't a lot growing up. I had to essentially pave my own path and figure out things for my own because what they know and what my parents knew only got them so far. And for me, there was a lot of pressure to figure out how the hell do I take care of my parents? How can I give up so much for them? And growing up older into society, when people are like, hey, what's your definition of success? What's your definition of freedom? And for me, it was always the first answer was, how do I retire my parents? How can I tell them, hey, you don't have to work so hard anymore. I got you.
I was like, yo, I'm doing this shit for you guys. I know I may not be a doctor or a lawyer, but trust me, I'm gonna do this shit.
I knew you can do it.
But then a lot of people didn't understand. You're like, huh? I don't really get that, Peter. Like, that's for them, but what is it for you? And because it comes from a place of their own privilege, where because they're never seen their parents struggle like that, or because when they're a kid, their parents never fought about money and seeing, your parents cry about, money and being how poor you are, you have much of a different understanding of what it is about life. And I'm going to talk about exactly is culture, where Asian culture is very much based on collectivism, meaning that we're always thinking about the unity, the whole. It's never about the individual. And a good example of this is when you're 18 years old and you get kicked out of the house, hey, you need to fend for yourself. You need to figure out, what you want. And your parents don't really care about you. They want you out of the house. Where for most Asian folks, and it's very common where you live with your parents until you're a lot older, even get married, get a partner. And it's very much of a group thinking. It's not so much about what I want and this is what makes me happy. It's like, how can we as an entire collective be happy, or how can we thrive and prosper? And that comes all the way back to Confucius thinking, right? Versus where in the Western world, it is very different. And what most people, especially your parents, don't understand is that if they make that immigration trip from wherever they are initially from to where they are today, the minute that you're born in Canada and the US, there's already going to be conflict because you have those two different schools of thought. And it's okay to understand that things were not fair. But the very fact that I am aware of this, having that awareness, is already putting me one step ahead of the game. To understand that life is not necessarily a race, but it is a competition. And you look around you, and some people have it easier. And I'm not talking about get mad or like complain about things you can't control because that will drive you insane. But understand your perspective and not compare yourself to someone that has it 10 times easier or 10 times harder. And you need to focus on your own race or competition. So, a good example of this is I worked with a pretty notorious influencer, and they talked about how hard their life was growing up and how when they moved out, they had to get their dad to help them pay for their one bedroom, really small downtown business district apartment. And they had a tough time growing up. And me coming from an immigrant household, coming from poverty, the fact that I heard that and they thought that was tough and a struggle didn't rub me the right way. And I'm going to draw a diagram so you guys can better understand what privilege actually is and how it exists in this world. So let's say this is a race, right? This is your starting line. And you and your parents speak English. Start here. Let's say you don't speak English, right? And you have to learn the language as a first generation Asian kid. You might start here. Let's say you are a second generation, you and your parents speak English and their parents speak English, so you have much of an easier time in terms to adapting to culture, family, and guess what? Your family is also business owners, so you are more affluent, so you potentially start here. Let's say you as an immigrant kid, right? Your parents don't speak English and you're also low income. So you also have to start here. Let's say you have problems and generational trauma, as well as you have issues and mental health issues, right? Let's say you start here and you have no resources. So as you can see, this is the starting point in life. Some people have to work this much here to even to get here. So to experience this, these people here do not experience that at all. So, for example, if you're super affluent, your parents speak English, you come from a very wealthy family, and you have a lot of wealth and knowledge that they passed on to you. Hell, you might even start like out here. So, this knowledge here, these people acquire and learn from experience from since there was upbringing, these people here don't even get close to understanding that knowledge because they themselves are still trying to get to even here. So as you can see, this is the walk of life. Everybody does not have an equal starting point. Yes, we all have same forward momentum when it comes to getting to whatever goal that we're trying to get to, but everybody starts in different positions. And as you can see, and I realize is that the more I worked in a corporate culture, the more privileged people were, the more saw that, wow, people had it a lot different than I have. What I'm trying to say is that there is levels to this shit. And to understand how life is very different, where you're comparing yourself with someone that has much more money, who has a much easier life, and you can't compare yourself to them. You have to understand life, the game itself, but to understand you comparing yourself without knowing the context of another person's life is completely unfair. We all have a fair shot in life, but everyone starts in different starting points. And the only person that you can compare yourself to is that reflection that you see in the mirror. Because I grew up in poverty and having poor Asian immigrant parents, it changed my way of the way that I see with money. It changed the way that, things that I am about myself, what I like and I don't like. And it takes a lot of time to understand that, hey, these are the cards that I've dealt with, but it is up to me to take responsibility as I am today to understand the world as it is. And how can I change as a person for my future children's children? You know what I mean? Even if you don't want to have family, how can I change my future so it does not become a replication of my past and my present? When it comes to having levels to this, I know that there are so many different dynamics where the very person that's looking at this video is like, oh yeah, Peter, you think you have it tough. I have it tough. I'm like, no, man, I love you for that. I love the fact that you are struggling and I'm here to try to understand you. What I'm trying to say is everyone struggles in a certain way. And just because someone has it quote unquote better in life with their social and economic status, it does not mean that they have their own hardships that I am so unaware of. There are so many contexts and things that we never fully articulate in a way that we never show. We live in a world where social media is like you see everyone's highlight reel now, right? You never see the L's. You never see about the family that's struggling paycheck to paycheck. And because their family comes from paycheck to paycheck in debt, no one gave them the financial literacy to understand how it is that they can get out of that, right? It's not about watching a simple YouTube video and being like, here are 5 ways to make passive income. No, it's a generational thing where it's like, I have the ability to be like, I'm going to learn about self-help and self-love and how to create more of an abundance mindset. How do I create more of a growth mindset? But if you grew up with, seeing your parents always fight about money, right? Making sure that is there gonna be food on the table comes from a very different place where it's like I have the overall liberty to be like, hey, I have a place to think about abundance. But the fact that you can even say that comes from a place that you yourself have privileges on your own level. And growing up as a kid, I always felt like it was unfair. The fact that I grew up just completely different. Like I remember, not to make a sob story, but like seeing kids have allowances. And I remember going to the mall when I was like 12, 13 years old and watching my friends eat. And I had to eat their leftovers because I didn't have money as a kid growing up. It was very different. And it just made me feel something was wrong with me. Something was like, wait, no, it's okay to feel like life is unfair. Life can be very unfair. The older you get, the more you realize this. And like I said, everyone starts in different places. But to understand this very fact, it will help you give a little bit of peace to it's okay to feel that you never had a childhood growing up. It's okay to feel life is very unfair. But you need to accept the cards that life has dealt you and figure out, what's next. It doesn't mean that you can't become a millionaire. It just means it's a little tougher. This topic was a little heavy. It was a little bit all over the place, but it's something that I'm passionate about because it's something that I grew up with. It's something that within my early 20s, I was really angry at the world and I couldn't really articulate it. But all it was is just privilege, man. It's just like there's different levels to life and everyone starts in different places. But if you have a story that you want to share, leave it down in the comments below. That was just a little bit spiel of understanding why, being Asian is tough, man, coming from poor Asian immigrants. And then don't even get me started, man. I might talk about this in the next video, but things like dating, right? Why is it that Asian guys have such a hard time dating? Why is it that, things like growth and talking about money, talking about finances, talking about self-help, talking about mental health is so not talked about in our culture? It's because of this, right? It's the fact that you are here in a Western world or wherever you are in the world, there's a different generation. And it is up to the ability that you can watch this video right now is that it's up to you to figure out how do you navigate through this life. And for me, the more I look at myself, the more I understand where my place is, the more I can come from a much authentic place of who I am and how can I talk to whoever's watching. How can I talk to that 12-year-old me and be like, it's okay, man. It's okay to feel that anger. It's okay to feel like life is unfair and to grieve a childhood that you never really had because you had to, quote unquote, be the chosen one, you know? But yeah, my name's Peter. Make sure you follow me on Instagram at BTHPeter. And thanks for listening to my little rant. And I hope that this can resonate with someone. It doesn't come from a place of hate or spite. It comes from a place where you need to understand that life, you're comparing yourself to someone who may have it a lot easier. And the fact that you have to work 3 times as hard to get to where you want to get to, it's like compared to yourself. Don't look around you. You're just going to get distracted. The more you accept the cards that life's have given you, you'll know exactly how you can launch yourself in the right direction.